Two vascular surgeons walk into a bar and come out with a podcast. We are talking everything vascular and not. Welcome to the Life of Flow podcast.
The following podcast is not relating to my teachings and work at Reflow Medical Center and is for entertainment purposes only.
Bienvenuti to the Life of a Flow, and this is show number. And today we have the true pleasure. It was a super fun conversation, very enthusiastic. I just love entrepreneurs. They're hustlers, man.
Yeah.
I love hustlers, and I love when their brain and their heart's in the right spot. Anyway, I'm talking about nobody other than Isa Rizk. And Isa is currently the acting CEO of Reflow Medical. Company's been a while around. You probably remember it by its catheters and crossing devices, like wingmen and so on and so forth. But they are about to shake the market below the knee interventions with some pretty cool technology. And today we focused on that. So you want to hear about it? Stick around.
Vamos. Today we have Isa. Isa, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. Appreciate your time on a Friday. And yeah, welcome to the Life of Flow.
Happy to be here, man. I appreciate the invitation. It sounds like an exciting time here.
There's lots of excitement.
Yeah.
There's excitement on all sides. We speak about everything vascular and not. And on the not side, we ultimately end up talking to a lot of industry friends, which, by the way, was not our original niche.
I know.
When we did this, Isa, we thought not that we wouldn't have guests of industry, but that we would have, as an audience, only physicians. And guess what? The metrics is half and half. So like reps, clinicals, all these people that are out there working with doctors find the conversations that we have very useful. And obviously, in retrospect, that makes sense, right? Because you're out there, we're all doing the same thing. And it's important for us to understand what's happening, to understand the conversations, to understand the effervescence of maybe some new technology. And so they get it first here. They get to, hear what doctors are saying and what makes them tick. And maybe that helps them also, get an edge, understand how to get into their, their psyche and so on and so forth. So it's been a very interesting part that we didn't expect, that we were going to be talking to actually industry folks. So your audience today here is actually very half and half. You're going to have a lot of vascular specialists, a lot of healthcare providers within that, a lot of cath lab techs and personnel from the cath lab, and then, the industry folks and stuff like that. So it'll be a very fun conversation.
I love it. I mean, we live and breathe from an industry perspective. You're the customer to us. And I always tell people, ultimately it's the patient, but we don't get to touch patients. We don't get to interact. I mean, we really live vicariously through all of you. So to me, it's always exciting. I mean, this is all out like the physician relationship, and whatever industry is doing has to actually accommodate a little bit, both ways. So I love these kinds of conversations.
Yeah, we like to have people that are, leading, innovating companies. So obviously we thought about it. So tell us a little bit about your background. How have you gotten to be at the edge of the spear, in a sense, in the vascular realm?
Well, it's a funny one, and maybe not too dissimilar. Maybe you guys, but I wasn't even born in the U.S. I was born, in Nazareth. I came to the U.S. when I was 5 years old. My family came for opportunity, immigrant family, and you had a lot of choices. It was either accounting, engineering, or law, and or doctor. Those were really that was it. There was no choice. And I knew how to take apart VCRs. I didn't know how to put them back together, but my mom said, "You'll be an engineer." I said, "Great." And I think the history of that was I studied mechanical engineering out of college. And then I got an internship with Baxter Healthcare at the time. No one knew, there was no biomedical engineering. It was mechanical, and no one even knew healthcare. It was more, I didn't even know there were engineers that did healthcare, to be honest with you. It was, and at the time I thought I was going to be aeronautical or something to do with cars. And so I ended up starting with Baxter Healthcare way back when, working on a project for vascular surgeons. And it was called the side branch occlusion device. It was going to be a way to minimally invasive saphenous vein bypass, and way ahead of its time. It was early in my career, but I got to really grow up in a big company. Baxter turned into Edwards Life Sciences. Edwards Life Sciences, as you know very well, started in heart valves, but they also had a side division in stents at the time, peripheral. And so we were a part, my team and I, and my current co-founder and I, John and I, we were a part of Life Stent. And that was our first venture into the peripheral world. Fast forward, I mean, I've been in healthcare now. I'm the old guy. I've been 30 years doing healthcare, and mechanical engineering background, went back to business school because I wanted to understand the business side. I left Edwards after 10 years and watching that kind of progression to go to an incubator. And the incubator was starting startups. We would literally have an idea either brought to us by a physician or internally, designed. And then we did anywhere from neuro, we did AAA, we did obesity, all kinds of different areas that we would develop a product, get it to first in human, get it to the clinical setting. And then the concept was either you sell the company or someone buys the company. And it sounded awesome until you realize this is like your baby, and then you're giving it up, and then a whole nother team takes it, and it might succeed, it might not. And you lost all that. And then we came on to Reflow Medical and started Reflow. It'll be 14 years in June. And the concept there was to grow and do something from scratch. So that's a little bit of background. So, I mean, I can give more color, but here I am. And I can't tell you how much I enjoy every day. And I love what we do. I think this is like the most exciting job I can ask for.
So 14 years, Reflow's been around. Okay. I didn't. Is it normal that I wouldn't have known that? I mean, I think that I've heard of Reflow maybe in the last 5 years. Is it normal that maybe in its inception it was a little baby cocoon and we still hadn't had a prime time, or is it that I'm just been behind the 8 ball here?
You're just such a big guy. You're never going to hear from guys like us, and so it takes a long time. But the reality of the matter is, Reflow at its inception was a company that was producing a CTO device and a support catheter, and really the goal was sell the company, right? It wasn't planned on doing a sales and marketing team. We didn't have this grand vision of building something bigger. It was a very simplistic. A couple engineers got together and we said, hey, this is a really good idea. Went to our advisory board, and then, which a lot of startups, that's how it gets developed. Is it a company or is it a product? I mean, you hear all these cliches, but we lived it. And the reality was, Reflow for many years was a small company of 2-3 people, went to 7, went to 10, and now we're 110. And the growth where you would have heard of us is because we decided at the time that we came up with a truly innovative, what we believe to be a therapeutic in the Spur stent that you'd hear more about, is when we also made the decision that we're going to build a company. And those are big steps that you make along the way. But, you would have, back in the day when we were doing Wingman and Specs and, some of the early catheter work, it wasn't about building a sales force around it. So yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, from your perspective, it's probably closer to when Spur started coming together with Reflow.
Understood. And walk me through the moment in which you decide to go from this as a product to this as a company. Like, what set of conditions are happening and what's the story behind that? Because obviously, as entrepreneurs at heart here, we love understanding about these business stories and decisions that go through it. Some of them very serendipitous, some of them actually very, mindset of making it somehow and making it work. So I'd love to learn a little bit more.
I think I think the biggest transition for us was having lived through the idea of having catheters and CTO devices that are really, I mean, by the way, fantastic. We have great engineers. We work collaboratively with physicians. We have no issue with iterating and getting it to the best possible technology, but that doesn't correspond to building a sales force in MedTech. And to be a company, you have to have the full portfolio that allows you to afford to build the company. And that's usually the missing ingredient with a lot of companies, is that, you've got a great idea, you got a great concept, but does that really mean that you're going to go and hire 100 salespeople and you're going to go for this and they're going to all pay for themselves and growth and everything else that you're looking at? So when you look at sustainability, it's about each individual that you bring on from the sales part really helping you grow and fund the business. For us, I tell you, and you're going to hear me say this because I live by this now. I didn't before. but I tell people there's 3 pillars to medical device success. You got to have a technology that has an unmet need. So you're not just, this is an area that there's a big unmet need. You got to have clinical efficacy. So you got to show people the efficacious part of the product, and you got to have reimbursement. And if you don't have all 3 of those, if someone came to me today and said, hey, I got this really cool idea, those are the first 3 questions I'm going to ask. And I wouldn't do it, because without those 3, getting a technology that gets adopted, that allows for you to build the business around and everything else, is really difficult. And then you end up in the bag of a Medtronic or a Boston or a J&J or some other bag with your technology. So for us, when we invented the Spur and we started doing our initial, first and foremost, it was a crazy idea, a spiked stent. Are you guys crazy? What are you doing with this thing? We went and did early first in human work to understand, is there something here? And then once we got some of the clinical work and data back, is when we stepped back as a company and said, wait a minute, you have 2 choices. You segregate this company, you take the Spur stent, and you run it on its own, and you try to develop that, and then you sell off the catheter business, or everything stays together and you just continue to build this company as one major entity. And that was the decision we made, because a lot of our physicians, like yourselves, came back and said, I don't understand. Why would you sell the catheters? We need those anyway when we're doing the case. They might not be the highlight reel, but they're used. They're synergistic. So we weren't doing a neuro technology and then a vascular technology and then a peripheral. And so at that point, you made the decision to say, all right, well, we're going to build this. And then you have 2 models, the build to sell or build to last. And we said, we're going to build to last. So that was, if you go back in time, about 2015, 2016 is when the initial concept of the Spur came out. And we made that decision as a company in about 2018. And that's about the time you probably started hearing about us.
Did you guys develop the concept, or did you bring it from the incubator or bring it from someplace else?
No, everything at Reflow was developed internally. And it was all about, I'm a big advocate for engineers spending time with physicians in the lab. I'm a big advocate of going out there. I love conferences, but I love conferences not because of don't get me wrong, I love the parties and the things that you hit a link, but the reality of in the labs and in the conferences is when you're listening to what physicians are telling you, right? And for us, every single technology we've developed has been physician interaction. And it's funny, we started with a scientific advisory board of folks that, I was an engineer coming out of Edwards. No one really knew who the hell I was, but I knew some doctors. So we put together an advisory board of really well-known physicians that could give feedback. And so the Wingman technology was developed because we kept watching doctors using every wire they can to try to fracture plaque and try to get through, using the back end of a glide wire. And we said, well, what if we just had a bevel tip that can come in and maybe carve a little bit and help you get through? That was the Wingman. The Specs catheter was an angled catheter. And the reason it's angled that you can shape it is because we kept asking physicians, what angle do you want? And every one of you gave us a different angle. And so we said, well, why don't we let them shape? And then the Spur was sitting at Link in 2015. All the data came out. Drug has to get into the wall. If drug doesn't get into the wall and BTK disease, we're not going to really get the results that we're looking for. Being a mechanical guy, I thought of a hairbrush. My wife has one of these hairbrushes. I don't know if you guys have seen them. I said, we need to mechanically get this drug in the wall. Went back to the hotel, called John, my co-founder, and said, can we make a stent that's got spikes on it? And he said, are you crazy? I said, no, I think this could be kind of cool. And there we go. So we, fast forward, this is where we are today.
That's interesting.
So as of now, it's a vessel prep tool with the objective to crack, penetrate, and create these areas of seepage, if you may, right, that can integrate. Are you thinking that it could also be a delivery vehicle on itself in another few iterations, or you like more I want it to be mechanical and then you come in with whatever you want?
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about the physician feedback from day one, which was, let's get in there, create channels, right? And then we can follow it with a drug coated balloon. And then we'll that's actually how we initially studied it, both in the Dominican Republic, first in human, and then we did our OUS work for our studies there, followed by any paclitaxel balloon. And then we did another study followed by a limus balloon, at which point our physicians came to us and said, well, wait a minute, guys, we see something in the Spur as a mechanical treatment modality where I'm seeing minimal recoil, minimal dissections. I really like the way this artery looks. And I don't know how much of that has to do with drug. I mean, that's mostly a mechanical effect because drug is about the long term. And so in that regard, we looked and said, well, okay, but there's no drug-coated technology in the US. And so there's nothing available as far as balloons were in the US. And so when we were in Europe, we got our CE mark on the data that we were able to provide, long-term and short-term, acute data. And then what we did is said, from that perspective, the European Union and CE mark technology, they have available to them drug-coated balloons. They don't use them very widely, as you guys may know, because of reimbursement and how that below the knee space is kind of played out in Europe and whatnot. But we, at that point, pursued and got as a preparation technology that you can use before you use a DCB. And that's currently how it is in Europe. However, when we came into the US, knowing there's no drug technology available, we said we want to look at this as a definitive treatment. And that's how we studied it in our US, where you actually ended the case with the Spur. So there was no preparation technology used ahead. There was a pre-dilatation, but then you treated with the Spur and you ended the technology, no other follow-on. So the Spur really becoming a definitive treatment, because we looked at the US and said, well, what are we comparing against? What's the gold standard today? What are you using? And I ask you this, and I'll ask all of you this, and it's really POBA today. And so that's our current. Now, in the meantime, way back when, being R&D guys and being pipeline guys, we said, we want to put our own drug on this. We want to also have our own system where we coat the Spur, we coat the integrated balloon, and we have our own drug-coated limus-eluting version. Mind you, we had a paclitaxel as well, but because of all of the chaos that was going on at the time, we pivoted and went to a limus version. So we partnered with the original inventors of drug-coated balloons in Germany. We then developed our own drug. Yes, it is expensive. It takes a hell of a lot of time, and it's a big commitment from a company's perspective. But for us, we said, we want to continue to add incremental value with anything we're doing. And as I was telling you guys, we have no issue iterating and developing and continuing to grow the company. And so that was a decision we made. So now we have a drug-coated version as well. Now, that has not been in clinical studies here in the US yet, but we have done some work in the coronary, because we have a coronary version. And so we are doing some work in the coronary side of the business with our drug-coated as well. So to answer your question, Miguel, it's a little bit of all, right? The Bear Spur, making that available. It has a lot of really nice traits to it, because you can reuse it up to 4 times. It's up to 220. We've treated up to 210 in our clinical studies. So, and then our drug-coated version, which we'd be bringing here and really proving what's the incremental benefit. Because you're going to ask, everyone's going to, well, what's the incremental benefit of the drug? What is it doing over time? Everyone keeps talking drug, but show me the incremental benefit on long diffuse disease. So that's what we're doing.
So where are you at with data at this point? Like what studies, if any, have enrolled, completed, or are enrolling?
Yeah, OUS studies, we've done, we did 3 different studies. We did a first in human 23 patient study. We did 107 patient deeper, we call it deeper OUS, which was 10 different centers in Europe. And then we did
sorry to interrupt, all tibial. All tibial?
So everything we've done on the Spur to date has been all tibial. We really are looking for long diffuse disease. So nothing was short focal lesions. This was long diffuse disease, average lesion lengths of 100 millimeters.
Real lesions. I said real lesions, not study lesions.
That's
not bullshit.
That was the goal, because I think a lot of times, as I'm sure you guys are well aware, I mean, there's a lot of ways to design these clinical studies, but we wanted to walk out of them with at least being able to pass your sniff test.
Yes, sir.
Show me the data. I mean, how many times do I treat a patient like this? And even with that, I mean, you still in clinical studies have exclusion criteria and whatnot, but we really tried to make it as broad as we could. And then for us, targeting the longer lesions and targeting and looking at, acute results, and then also, of course, long-term. So, we've got a good set of data in our European launch and what we've got there, and also longer-term data. In the US, we did a 130 patient study called Deeper Reveal. We just completed enrollment late last year. We're in the midst of this work now with the FDA to get this to the US market this year. And so, we're really excited about that. It's probably going to be one of the biggest launches in the history of our company, as you can imagine. And it's the Bear Spur. And then we've got, iterations of that with the drug coated, but that's got, we're still in the early research phase of getting to the clinical studies of that next.
So, when I treat these lesions, I usually try POVA first, and then there are these other recalcitrant lesions that have significant recoil. And then you do atherectomy, you do IVL, you have all these things, you do IVUS, you try to figure out how to fix this. Are you thinking that you are going to spur everything, or you're going to treat that, you're going to POVA, you're going to wait 15 minutes, you're going to see if there's recoil, where there's recoil, you spur?
So our thought process has been along the lines of, you kind of know what POVA provides for you today. It is the gold standard because there's nothing really else available. And you also know that to get a really good result, there's a lot of preparation that's going on. You've either atherectomized or you've done other kinds of technologies before you did the POVA. We did study recoil, and we did show it, because, by the way, getting people to wait 15 minutes is really hard. And
Yeah.
a lot of it you don't end up noticing because you're treating multiple lesions. So you've treated one and you think it's good, and then you go treat the other one. And then by the time you're treating the other one, you notice there's recoil back over where you were. And so I think when we did our research, we reduced recoil by over 60%, which again, for us said, wow, this is really, something that we think beyond the recoil is, you've got recoil, you got dissections, you got, are you getting the maximum luminal gain that you want to see as far as this patient is concerned and what you're treating? So I think from our perspective, we're going to be really cautious about this, right? We're not going to come out to spur it all, just go for it. I think that's the mistake a lot of companies make, because you're looking at the top line revenue and you're trying to get, as much as, but the reality for us is we're going to come out here methodically, and we're going to show you, here's what we've done. I'm not going to ask you why to spur. I'm going to ask you why not. I want to learn more of, like, why would you say, I wouldn't do that here? I wouldn't use it here. And I think it's the right approach with physicians, as opposed to coming at you and go, Dr. Fur, please, spur, that's not our approach. Our approach is here. We've got really good data. We're not pounding our chest saying we cured cancer here. That's not what we've said. What we're doing is we've got a really good technology available that we think will enhance what you're currently doing. And if we can prove that to you over time, which I believe we will, then I think that you will have the utility in this technology that is far, superior to what you're currently using. And maybe at some point when you look at it, does it become the standard of care for you? What does it take to become the standard of care in this industry and in this space relative to CLTI? It's a tough space. And as you all know, there's a lot of things that we still are going to need. And, the toolbox isn't full by any means, but I think understanding where and when to use these things is probably the most critical piece of the puzzle.
So you mentioned something at the top of the show, which is a successful company has these 3 buckets that you have to fill. Would you care to expand on what reimbursement you see potentially here driving market adoption with this device?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, the reimbursement can be seen 2 ways, right? There's the happenstance, the afterthought reimbursement, or there's a clear vision for a company to set up and structure reimbursement from day one. And, we were very fortunate to have really good advisors that said to us, even when we came up with this concept, you guys should evaluate reimbursement and go deep, so you understand when this comes to market, what does it look like? And we did
Right.
that. And we did that to such a degree that now, as we come out to the market, there's already an existing CPT code that our technology fits under. And so that's going to be the key driver as far as the why not, right? So some of the reasons you hear are, it could be cost, it could be that there is no reimbursement, and so it really limits the adoption rates. So when we're out the gate coming with a technology that allows you to go after current CPT stent coding, validated, so then you're in a position as a physician to eliminate any kind of things that hold you back relative to that part of the business. Now it comes on us to show you the efficacy part. Here's the data. Here's what we've done. And then the unmet need is clear. For us, it's clear. But the reality is it clear in the patient selection and which ones you want to treat? So that's I think, the key metrics for us. And it gets us so excited about why bringing this to you, again, trying to get rid of some of the hurdles that I think technologies face when they come out.
Yeah,
Can you
we were
explain?
having, yeah, let me just say why I think this is really important is we were having a really good discussion with a buddy of yours, Scott Adonisio,
Scotty, yes.
not too long ago, and we were talking about how physicians need to substantiate their work with margins, right? No margin, no mission at the end of the day. But the margins are there. As long as you understand who your partners are, and as long as you understand how to be polished and work through those things, then these things become doable. It's not everything in medicine, and certainly not everything in vascular medicine is a lost cause. Um, but and so I really think I want to harp on this a little bit more because I really think it's important for our audience to understand that having companies that look deep into reimbursement, of course, are setting themselves up to win, but they're also setting us up for a win, for the capacity to carry on our companies and our industries and to be able to maintain our independence and not be always sucked into the hospital systems. So I guess the thought here is that there are current CPT codes. So just for my understanding, there are current CPT codes that include balloon angioplasty and stenting of the tibial vessels,
Right.
37228 or C73230 or
37230.
something. Okay. And so the idea here is that the scaffolded nature of this device, independent of it being transient, has still a scaffold effect because of the nature of the mechanics. And so even though, there is no actual mechanical scaffold left behind, the actionable item over the vessel wall and the mechanics is that there was a scaffold in place. Because one could also argue, well, then, you wouldn't be able to, if you want to be, if you want to look at this in black and white, then by observable stent, could you scaffold? Is it scaffold or not? Because it's not going to be there in a year,
Yeah, it's
right?
like
And
time
so,
is relative. That's the
yeah, so
fun. That's
then
the funny part of that.
time
Yeah,
is relative. You can't really criticize the technique because the idea is this is a scaffold like, offering. And to your point, I think it's really important that then you substantiate that with your data, right? That you say, okay, well, um, this is why I don't feel like there's an immoral. I don't feel that there's an immoral compass here, because the reality is that what we're doing is equating stent-like results. And so, is it the same stenting CPT codes that you used for temporal scaffolding, or are these different scaffolding codes that you were mentioning?
No, they are the same codes. And the
Okay.
reality of stenting, and this is a question I always ask because I'm really curious, right? And you go back and you guys have been doing this for quite some time. And think about the inception of stenting as a whole, right? And I've been in this industry for 30 years looking at when stents, why stents, and the reality was, to your point, I think you said it earlier, is like you POBA, but then you don't like the result, and you got recoil or you got something else, so you threw a stent in, and the stent kept it open, and it looked really good. And then stents occluded, so then we started putting drugs on stents, and then those still occluded, and we can't then go back do a bypass, or it becomes an issue. So then we started making them disappear. And so in the history of the evolution of technology, we like POBA. It's great because it opens, but really good POBA usually may dissect, right? Or may create issues. So then we tried to put band-aids on that by putting stents in. And then stents they looked really good initially, but then over time, you wanted to get rid of them. So when we thought about the concept of scaffolding and stenting and putting this into an artery, it was kind of like, well, if I can give you a really good pristine result, which is kind of what you're looking for usually, right? You want to walk out of that lab and you want to feel good about what you just did, how you just treated with a really sound, the flow is there, the artery looks clean. And you never always know, you're running IVUS, you're looking at, there's other ways, but if I can give you that, then the chances are you're going to do better long term. And those are the things that we continue to evaluate is, and then, and CLTI is really hard, as you know, because we can tell you get wound healing. Well, you're going to argue, well, I can get wound healing by a balloon. Is that really the effect that I'm looking for? Or is it CDTLR rates? Is it really patency? What are the things I'm looking for long-term from your technology? And I think from our perspective, we think, this whole procedure we're talking about takes about 6 minutes, right? So you're doing a inflation, deflation, stent is indwelling, you have arterial flow while you're treating. So that idea that you can get arterial flow and you get this compliance going while the stent is there, and then removing the whole system. So the removing part is the part that everyone's like, huh, interesting. And that's the part that we've really honed in on to say, we remove it. And the reason we did this, I'll be really honest, it wasn't like this was not, we didn't, the idea was very simple. Put holes in the wall to create channels to fake drugs. That's how dumb I am. I wasn't like, oh, wow, what if this recoil well? That was all like an afterthought of like, holy crap, look at this. We'd run, and it wasn't me, it was the physician saying, look at this. I removed it. It looks like it's still there. And that was the aha moment for us to say, holy cow, there's something here, and to your point, I mean, I think that, we're very confident in that. We're confident in this concept of, being able to do the stent, but no one really studied scaffolding and the time frames of scaffolding over time. But we think there's something real here. And that's the exciting part. And if you think about what drug-coated balloons have done.
Super quick question. From a practical standpoint, is that CPT code determination that you can add to that, that's something that you get with CMS, right? That's not like an FDA thing. That's something that you negotiate with CMS, and CMS has to be an approval that this particular technology is going to fall within this particular category of a device, and for this category of the device, we are going to allow you to use this particular CPT code when you bill. I'm just saying, like, that's right. It
goes deeper than that. It's,
okay.
CMS, FDA, completely separate, right? With regards to that. But the actual other one is the clinical, the scientific committees. So when you look at your scientific committees, you look at, SCI, SBS, all of that actually goes into the CMS portion of CPT coding. So it's a very different, I can give you about an hour and a half long presentation on reimbursement that I will spare you and your audience from today. But at any given point, what we've realized as far as reimbursement is you got to dive real deep. You really got to understand it. And then you got to work with it and understand how that plays back. And at the surface level, I think what you notice industry does a lot relative to reimbursement is that you'll get a guide. Here's the suggestions. Here's the reimbursement guide that most companies have done. And then we dive deep relative to the needs of each individual, whether it's a hospital, whether it's an OBL, ASC. There's a lot of different ways that you do coding and what you work on. So that's the process. We, again, like I said, I always tell people, this isn't a wink, wink handshake. That's not us. That's not Reflow. I would never do that, right? That's not how we did this company. This is a legitimate, validated, reimbursement guide and guidance that we get. So I think that's the key to remember. And to your point, you were absolutely right. It's not FDA and CMS. They're totally separate, but even within CMS and CPT coding and scientific committees, it's separate as well. So there's a lot of avenues here that need to be uncovered when you do these things.
But I guess what I want to say is, if I get a Medicare patient tomorrow and I use a Spur in, if I put a CPT code that includes balloon angioplasty and stenting, I'm not going to necessarily get audited the next day and say, you didn't put a stent, so we're going to ask you to return the money.
No.
Because you've already done this homework, and CMS is already approved to put this device within a category in which you can bill appropriately, responsibly, and legally for scaffolding, correct? That is okay.
Explain to me why, again, let's go back to results from data. Why the hell do I care of anything else other than patency? Why do I care? Like, when I'm studying you, when I'm looking at your study, because I feel so dumb when I go to all these meetings and they have all these results. And I was like, why the F do I care about wound healing from an atherectomy device when wound healing is like a multifactorial, outcome that, depends just as much as the wound care person than does the atherectomy device. Can you explain that to me, Miguel? Because I feel so dumb whenever the hell I listen to these talks.
I think I know the answer to this question, and I don't think you should feel dumb for not. But the reality is, the patient is coming to you because the patient has chronic limb-threatening ischemia, which is a combination of a multitude of things. But ultimately, what this patient needs is they're seeking to be relieved off of this particular situation that they're dealing with, gangrene of the toe or non-healing wound, or let's say, what have not. And so the reason why I believe it becomes a little confusing is because if I can do a toe amputation with 3 months of patency and get that toe to heal, and those 3 months of patency came from a plain old balloon angioplasty, at the end of the day, if I do something that's going to keep the vessel open for 6 years, but the end clinical result was the same, then patency becomes a less important matter in that sense. That's it. So my 2 senses in this have been that chronic limb-threatening ischemia in general is not as dependent of patency as other diseases, like, for example, intermittent claudication. But then you have to tease deeper into the weeds, because the reality is it is dependent on patency, specifically when looking at more complex disease conditions. And so it's very easy to say POBA is the same for everything, when the reality
No,
is it's not.
that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that, you have an integrated practice with, with integrated wound care, integrated podiatry. You're going to have, in theory, better results than if you choose me as a site and you choose him as a site, you're going to have a better, there's going to be a confounding effect of your integration of your practice than mine. So
You heard it here. To all of you companies out there seeking research
yeah.
facilities, make sure you come to Hope and not to
What?
Del Seaton.
But then I'm not when I look at the study and look at the results, that could be just Miguel's SOPs and not your product. So why the hell do I care anything else other than patency? I don't. Great, Miguel has a great integrated practice. Awesome, cool. That doesn't help me in, when I'm a physician with my OBL and starting up in like Laredo or like somewhere in the valley. That's not the same. So what I care, if I'm that guy, is the patency. So why doesn't everybody else?
I mean, I will
Or
tell you,
am I
I've
just
asked this
retarded?
question to many of you. I've asked this question of what do you care about? And, at the end of the day, what result are you looking for your patient? I hear a lot of, I do hear wound healing, but I don't hear it to the degree. I hear relative to treating a patient, you want wound healing and CDTLR rates. And a lot of them will say patency is great, but patency, you guys are doing this for a clinical study. And in getting someone that can read an ultrasound at 6 months or 1 year, you have non-diagnostic ultrasound specifically below the knee that you see a lot of. So, I mean, I think there's, we're trying to assess it as you are. We're trying to, what is the right endpoints for these clinical studies as you look at them, and what really constitutes a treatment modality that you're willing to try and use for your patient. And is it going to make it better? I mean, if you get a wound that heals to a patient and they're not coming back to see you, are you happy? I mean, is that a good result for you? I mean, that's a question I ask all of you.
Well, but I get to tease out the problem. If the vessel's patent, I get to tease out the problem. Okay, my problem is in my follow-up. My problem is in my wound care. My follow-up is in nutrition. I get to, knock things out.
I understand. But listen, the fact of the matter is that we are plumbers, and as plumbers, if you want to make sure that you open something that acts as normal as possible for as long as possible. But the reality is that there are subsets of patients, and we're more than plumbers. We're doctors, and we're taking care of all these other variables like infection, like offloading, like neuropathy, and so on and so forth. And so, if you can, safely treat somebody with a device that costs you $20, and you're going to get probably the likelihood of the same end result on a very small, then you shouldn't care about patency in that setting as a holistic limb preservation expert that's looking at all these variables. I would like you to not necessarily just look at it as a plumber, but more as a physician. And I think in that sense that it's, a $25 result that gets you past the finish line is probably not a bad thing. But what I do think, to substantiate this conversation, is the fact of the matter is that those cheap shot things are becoming a thing of the past. And you don't get easy, things that you could just POBA and get past the finish line. And more we are looking at incredibly severe diffuse calcified lesions that don't do well with what we have. I was surprised that you said you always POBA. I'll be very honest. I mean, some of these lesions that I see that are just essential calcium rocks that I have even a difficulty getting a wire through, I'll just get an atherectomy device off the bat. I'm not going to waste my time putting a POBA because I know it's not even going to, I'm going to bust the POBA. It's not going to cross sometimes. B, if I cross, I'm going to bust it at, 6 atmospheres. And C, I'm going to waste time that I know I should have just invested on the front end doing vessel preparation.
I don't know. I think you get so much information from just like under that, a 2 millimeter balloon and long 2 millimeter balloon, and then just like just take your time and see how it behaves.
That shows the white hair you're developing. I love hearing you be thoughtful and use these very simple. Yeah, because I agree. Honestly, you get as much information on how it inflates as how it deflates. Have you never noticed that?
That's because you have more white hair than I do.
But when you see the balloon deflating, you actually see the way it pulsatiles, and it's like the vessel's open or the vessel isn't open based on the way that the pulsatility actually collapses.
Yeah.
A balloon, when you have a balloon that you know very well, and I'm sorry, we digress sometimes, Isa, but when you have a balloon that you know what the deflation, like if I use jades, I know how fast they deflate.
Yeah.
Within a certain pressurization.
Mm-hmm.
When a jade deflates very slow, I know it's because it's not getting pushed, which means I know that there's a problem still that I have to fix, maybe up.
See, you still have things to teach. Huh?
Yeah, hopefully. And when I think I don't have anything to teach, I went on and had a kid, and now I can teach him everything from like how to poop, and that's pretty cool. But anyway, back to you, Isa. How long before we are ready to go in the U.S.? What's keeping us from rock and rolling?
As long as everyone stays employed in the FDA and we don't have any major changes and shifts anymore, we're optimistic to have this out in the first half of this year. And I think that will
you're
be
looking
phase
at
one.
Q3. Are you going to officially launch Q3, or are you going to wait and hold and
No,
get ready for Q4
we'll
or
officially
Q1?
launch it on approval. So we'll, it's Q2 is probably our target of launch.
Okay.
And I think we're preparing and listen, it takes a lot as you guys, I'm sure, are aware. When you do a launch as a small company coming out, if you think about it, you hadn't, a lot of people, don't know who you are yet. You're trying to get your name out there. Now, we've been fortunate to have catheters, so we've been able to get out there and get into some of the labs and clinics and introduce Reflow to people. And we've taken a huge shift into a sales and marketing company, right? We're an R&D heavy clinical company historically, and that's where we spend all of our time, money, and energy. And as you get into this next phase, you're going to hear a lot more about who we are and what we're doing. And ideally, building a brand around, because I think I heard a lot from physicians like, I don't want to see one product and then you guys are gone or for whatever reason. That's not our mission. Our mission is to come out and make the relationships last and make them long, and then show you what we're doing and continue to iterate and come up with new technologies. So we're excited. We're excited for this new time that's about to hit Reflow.
Random question. Have you guys ever thought of leveraging, like, say, 3 small companies that have complementary products to come together to build a sales force? Because that seems, I've never seen that. It just came into my head. It's like, is that something that you guys have even talked about?
Yeah, I think the hardest part in doing that is each company wants the sales force to focus on their technology, and a lot of this is how each of the sales teams incentivize. So many years ago, we did a distribution agreement. Reflow did with a company. It was a disaster. It was probably the worst decision I've made as a CEO of a company, because I thought if I went from 0 sales reps to 81 sales reps, it's going to be a wild success. And then we quickly learned the sales reps that were selling another technology to sell our complex CTO devices were completely different. And it really did not give justice to the technology. And a lot of times innovators get excited, physician innovators. Oh man, I signed a deal. We're going to, I'm going to partner with this one or that one. But it doesn't correlate to success of your technology or your product, because it really depends on how's the team incentivized, who the technology, who's selling to. Are you doing it to, is this for vascular surgeons, interventional cardiologists, or interventional radiologists? So all those have to come into play, which is why, a lot of times you see these companies that are small, their ultimate goal is just, they either get sold, someone gets acquired and then get thrown into a bag and then they walk away, and so I think that's historically what you see a lot of. I mean, I love diving deep into companies and histories of companies, why some succeed, why some fail. The successes are a lot less, as you know. I mean, it probably list on our two hands. It's the failures that you learn a lot about, and what didn't work. And it's not
But
always
the
the
long,
technology.
I said the long-term play here is still to hope for an M&A, no?
No, I mean, I think the long term, as I tell people, a long term play is, can we build a business? I mean, I come from a family of business owners. They laugh at me. They say, "Wait a minute, I don't understand. You've been around 14 years. You raise money, but you don't make money. It doesn't make any sense to us. We run businesses that are profitable from day one." And so I think getting to a profitable med device business is probably one of the biggest goals that we have. And the reality of M&A and that all, there was a great mentor of ours, and he told me once, he said, "Listen, Isa, if you have what it takes to build a business around the portfolio, then plan A is you build it. If someone wants to come in and do a deal, whatever, great, that's plan B. But the problem is, if you build businesses on plan B, you're not really building the sound business. You're taking
That's
shortcuts.
true.
You're announcing financings. You're doing things to get your name out there so people would say, 'Oh my gosh, you should go buy that company.'" And that's not how Reflow is structured. We're not structured to go and brag about something we've done so someone can buy us. We're structured to build it. And that's actually the most liberating feeling. I got to tell you, from a CEO's perspective, it's the most liberating feeling. Not because I have anything against the bigger companies or M&A. It's just that I don't want to be dethroned to what has to happen when I get to a certain milestone or a certain inflection point. I want to know that I have a mission that's sustainability. That's my goal. That our goal. How do we Reflow become sustainable? That's the key.
I like that a lot. I like that a lot because it almost look, like you're wearing the jersey to make sure that this is a project. Now, whatever that happens in the future, then happens in the future. But you're not distracted by all these. It's no hocus pocus. It's not a move to get to this other move to get to this other move to try to see if somebody else can look at me or not. So, um, listen, I would like to make sure that you come back again. I think that this story, I know you've been doing it for a few years already, but it sounds like it's still a newborn, man. I think that you have so much more pretty cool and amazing things to develop. And I have no question that that your company is gonna rumble pretty hard, is gonna beat those drums, and is gonna make a name, and people are gonna turn around, and some heads are gonna be turning. And so we want to know more about this Cinderella story.
I appreciate that. I mean, I'd be happy to, as long as I'm still going strong, as we're hoping to. And I just did I did a presentation with Dr. Patron over at FYA, which was, it was like, tell your fascinating journey. And I ended it and I said, I don't know, I feel like it's just getting started. I mean, I don't even know.
Yeah,
We're just
yeah,
getting
yeah.
going.
That's how I feel. I mean, it sounds like 14 years, but you're just getting
Yeah,
started, man.
it's crazy.
Some companies have been around for hundreds of years, so who knows, right? Well, it's been a true inspiration to hear your story, your passion, your vision. And may again, this Life of Full podcast be a home for you to bring your ideas. Let us know, because we'd love to hear from you again. Maybe in I don't know, we batch every 2 months, so maybe in like 6 months we'll talk again, see where you guys are at. Because I bet you that you're already out there, you know, kicking doors and taking names.
Love it. I think that'd be awesome.
All right, man. Well, thank you
Awesome,
very
man.
much for your
Nice.
time. It's been great.
Yes,
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.